Fixing a hole where the rain gets in and stops my mind from wandering.
Welcome! Today I'm going to walk you through how to replace a common issue on a top-load Whirlpool washing machine, the coupler. A good indicator that your coupler has failed is that your washer will no longer spin. This happens for a number of reasons, but most commonly is that it has worn down or someone has overloaded the machine and caused it to fail. For this job, you will need both a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver, a pair of pliers, a 1/4 inch and an 11 and 32 inch nut driver, a hammer, and your new coupler. Before we begin, you should make sure that you have unplugged your machine and turned off both water valves. I like to remove the fill hoses altogether and pull the washer out to give me more room to work. Once that is done, we can begin to remove the control panel. Most Whirlpool control panels are secured by 2 Phillips screws, often located behind some end caps. Remove them, pulling from back to front, and you'll see the screws at the bottom. Remove both and set aside, then flip the control panel back. Next, we need to remove the wire harness that connects to the close lid switch. We also need to remove the 2 brass retaining clips. It's easiest to take either screwdriver and push down on the clip and towards the front of the machine. Now we can remove the shell of the machine and set it aside. If you have the room, it's easiest to tip the machine onto its back. There may be some water that spills out, so have a towel ready. If your machine is full of water or you don't have room, that's okay. You'll just need to work lying down instead. Next, we will need to remove the metal retaining clips securing the drain pump. Take your flathead screwdriver and pry them off. You can now move the drain pump out of the way. If there is no water in the machine, it's easiest to take the pump off altogether. You can do this by moving the spring clips with your pliers and pulling the tubes off of the pump. If there is water in the machine, simply tuck the pump out of the way. Now we can remove the wire harness going into the motor. Some washers have screws securing the motor retaining clips. If yours does, use the appropriate size nut driver to remove them and then your flathead screwdriver to remove the retaining clips. Set the motor aside. We can now remove the coupler. You may need to wedge in a flathead screwdriver and hammer to loosen it off. If all else fails, you can use the tools to break the coupler, since you won't need it anymore. Remove the coupler from the motor as well as the black rubber gasket from whichever side it's on. Place your new coupler onto the motor and then the other half onto the transmission. You may need to use your hammer to secure this coupler on, as it may be a tight fit. Place the black rubber gasket onto the coupler that's positioned onto the transmission. I like to make one of the openings for the rubber gasket at the top while the other 2 are at the bottom. This will just make it easier for me to line up the motor in our next step. With your coupler placed on both the transmission and the motor, it's time to put the motor back on. This is the hardest step. Line up the motor coupler with the holes in the rubber gasket on the transmission coupler and push in the motor. Before letting go, ensure that the motor has depressed into the coupler and then attach one of the motor retaining clips. Now you can let go and attach the other one. If these clips were secured by screws, be sure to put them back in. Reattach the wire harness. Reattach the drain pump and the drain pump retaining clips. If you remove the hoses, be sure to connect them and the spring clamps as well. If you tipped your washer over, be sure to lift it up now. Then, put the shell back on by making sure the front lip of the shell is under the base of the washer. Open the lid of the washer so you can look down through to make sure of this. Replace the brass retaining clips. It's easiest to put the back of them into the back of the machine, and then use your hand to fit the front of them into the hole of the shell. Reattach the wire harness at this time. Flip the control panel back over and secure it by placing any grooves in the slots and putting the screws back in. Reattach the end caps if your machine has them. Check to make sure you did the job properly by plugging in the power and turning the dial to spin.
Hopefully you were able to fix your machine and get it working properly. Now that you're done with this, you can get right back to work doing laundry. Have fun!